Hey everyone, I'm Aaron Potratz.
And I'm Nathan Hawkins.
We are the Shrink Think Podcast.
Baby.
Enjoy the show.
We're going to do it.
This is going to happen.
The red light is on for that.
Yes, red light. We are recording live.
We are two wild and crazy
guys. All the young people are like, who are these weird O's?
It's called Saturday Night Live.
Back when it was good.
Back when, yes.
Steve Martin, who's very ancient by now.
And Dan Aykroyd. They were the two
Oh,
wild
Dan
and crazy
Aykroyd,
guys.
that's right. Yeah. Which one?
Yeah, that was when it was actually funny. Probably Dan Aykroyd.
No. Why?
Obviously, he's funnier. Yeah.
Funny people are like, I don't know that guy.
He's actually still out there. He was his most recent thing because he's in the background of a lot of stuff I've learned, like working production type of stuff or just retiring, but come back every now and then. But he did a bunch of cameos in the Ghostbusters movies. That came out.
I saw that.
They actually did a pretty good job with the Ghostbusters. The Frozen one wasn't that great, to be honest. It was okay. It was like, dang it, don't lose it. You're gonna keep it going. You're like, okay, well, it's kind of. So we should talk not about Ghostbusters.
Let's not. Let's do emotional availability, openness,
Closing.
closing.
The doors are closing. The doors are closing.
I'm like all of a sudden oh no, I need to catch my flight.
Right.
I got a little sense of anxiety for a second. Like, how far do I have to take this train to get
But
to
it's
the next
the other
terminal?
thing they say something like, I'm thinking of Disneyland when they say, please remain seated.
Yes.
Please remain seated. If
Exactly.
you will know.
Right.
And I know I'm saying that wrong. People out there be like, oh my gosh, that's not what he says. Okay, all right, I'm not speaking Spanish, it turns out.
All right, ready?
Richa.
Reacher? Okay.
Good movie. Show. Whatever.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Shrink Think Podcast. Here we are again recording, bringing some fresh new content for you. Episode 204, I believe, is probably where this is going to be. And this is a follow-up to an episode we did. We've gotten a pretty warm response from it. I would say, not that we get cold responses from the other ones, but a lot of people just saying like, oh, I listened to this episode and it was really good, or I'm surprised you didn't record on this earlier. And in a way, it's kind of like, yeah, how did we miss that, right? But it's on the episode we released, I think 201, a couple of episodes ago, on holding space in relationships. And so we want to follow up on that episode and talk more about like emotional availability in terms of like, is somebody closed off? Is somebody open, or are they actually emotionally available? Just because somebody is open emotionally doesn't mean they're actually available. And I think these kinds of things are very, very common dynamics in relationships, whether you're dating, trying to find somebody, trying to figure out, the right partner to be with, or whether you're long-term relationship or married. This issue is something that comes up all the time. So, Nathan.
Boom. Yeah, I think where I kind of came up with this in the first place was around some people that I'm working with that are dating. And so this one person was talking about how he's like, well, I feel like I want somebody who knows themselves and who has a good communicator, blah, blah. Of course, I want them to be attractive, right? Of course, everybody wants that, right? Because
I'm looking for somebody who's not attractive.
Exactly, that's what I usually say.
Least attractive.
I thought you would look for somebody that was not attractive at all. This is weird. Let's talk more about that.
Do they have a big wart on their nose? I want that person.
Is there something somehow Machiavellian about their attitude? Yeah. So we'll just believe that there. But they were talking about how, like, before they had a tendency to date well, and we don't know this I don't know this for sure, but they would label them as, everybody wants to label the narcissist thing, right? That's why we did a thing on narcissism a while back.
Right.
I'm so tired of hearing about it.
No, they're not.
Exactly.
And she's not bipolar.
Right. Oh yeah, that's the other one. Oh my gosh, I'm so bipolar. I liked ice cream earlier today, and now I like sandwiches. Like, no, okay.
Susie, you're just pregnant. That's all. That's the only thing that's happening.
That is so sexist. Okay. Anyways, so getting back to whatever the heck we were talking about, they were talking about how they finally found this person that they thought, they're like, oh my gosh, they're so emotionally available. This is so great. And I said, well, are they emotionally available or emotionally open? This person had came from dating people that, like, well, in their opinion, are narcissistic, right? So meaning like all that they're probably closed off and don't share much. And then they're now talking to somebody who's talking about their emotions a lot. And so they're like, well, wait, what do you mean? I'm like, well, if they could talk about their emotions or everything they feel, are they interested in what you feel? Do they pursue anything? Sat there like, no. I'm like, okay.
Our relationship was so great. Why did you have to ruin it?
I know.
Don't go to therapy. It
Well,
ruins your relationships.
And another lady I was talking to was actually thinking, she's like, man, she's almost felt obligated to stay in the relationship because this guy in her mind was so emotionally available, and she always picks guys that don't talk about anything at all emotionally. Mm-hmm. So she's like, oh, I found one, but I don't know if I'm like 50-50. She like kind of wasn't really that interested,
like,
but
there's your answer. Huh?
But really, I should probably stay because he has emotions.
Should stay?
Right.
That's exciting.
Yeah, like, I guess the dude's attractive, so there's that. We got to check the box, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's true.
And yeah,
because there are no other attractive guys that are emotionally available.
Well, that's probably true in Portland. Yeah, I mean, I hear about it all the time. I don't know if you hear about this, but people are like, the dating pool is so tiny, I guess, that they're like, oh my gosh, I can't, like, that's another part of it too, which I just want to say, I understand. That's the other side of it, is you also think, well, bro, I've got like 2 people that we're looking at here. I mean, there's, and everybody else is a moose, you know? Yeah, right. Or there's something weird.
That sounds
like, or they just want to hook up type of thing.
Yeah, right.
That's the other thing. Anyway, so I'm honoring that, but so she was like weirdly excited that he wasn't maybe emotionally available. It was like, wait, maybe he is just open. He might not care. Like, might not, in other words, be interested in how one, like in this case, how she feels, and then want to share how he feels. So this person would hear how she feels only to basically somehow use that for like currency. It wasn't like he was interested and then just using that to connect. It was like, oh, you like that? Okay, here's all these things you can do, that kind of thing. Which in the beginning is fine, but over the course of time, it feels like really hollow and needy.
And you start to feel the hole that's left of like, oh, but I have this that I want you to know, or I feel this, or I want you to ask about this, or I want you to be interested in that. And so you notice the difference between when you are seen or heard, which doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's like, oh, that's so good, but you don't actually do that specific thing very much with me. And I actually am realizing I need that a whole lot more than you give. What I thought initially was availability is just openness, and maybe occasionally you dip into availability, but you spend most of your time in openness, which is great for what it is, but it's not a full meal.
So think of it in terms of shared and mutual, if you just think of those 2 words. And then look at the word open, I picture like an O, and right behind the big O is a vacuum cleaner. Like, it's just sucking everything in. So they share their feelings, and then you share yours, and you hear a whirr, and all the feelings go whoa, right in the black hole. They're like, here it goes.
The thing I think of is like a pickup window, at a restaurant or a fast food place or whatever. It's like you go up and they hand you your bag and then you go. It's like you take what you need and then you move on. You don't stop and ask, hello, how was your day today? do you like your job? Has it been busy for you today? I know you probably do a lot of mobile orders here. Does that get stressful for you? That doesn't happen. You just like, my name's this, where's my food? Right? And then you move on. You just take, and then that person is just doing their job, giving all day long.
So next time you go to a mobile window, get to know your...
Yeah, that's right. Changing the world one mobile order at a time.
They're like, yes, I do see a lot of people go, leave now. Anyways, yeah.
Okay, so just for clarity's sake, let's define out a bit of what these like categories are, because I think that would be helpful, and we can kind of put some like legs behind this for what this looks like. So if somebody is emotionally closed, it means they're not really interested in or maybe capable of talking about emotions,
Their own emotional
world, and probably the emotions of other people,
Yeah.
right? Because if somebody doesn't, if they're not aware of or connected with the emotions in their self, they're not going to be able to do that very well in somebody else, because you have to know and understand your own self in order to be able to see and recognize and speak to that in somebody else. So and I say they might not be capable because for some people, they just don't know. They don't know what they don't know. Maybe they were raised in a certain environment and they just didn't realize that they were missing out on that. But at a certain point in their lives, maybe they come to therapy and they realize I need to get better at this, or I'm interested in it. I guess I'm realizing there's more to this that I don't know, and I need help with that. It's not because they're not capable or not interested. They just didn't know. And then there are some people who just absolutely are not interested, right? In other episodes we've talked about out here on the West Coast, there are like Intel, Nike, a lot of like left brain. I mean, some of them are creative, but engineer types that are just really not interested in the emotional stuff because it's not functional, practical. It doesn't move the ball forward. It's not tangible or concrete like facts and thoughts are. But emotions are just sort of like woo. So some people are just closed off to that because they don't see the value. They don't see how helpful it is. It just spins you in circles or gets you riled up, or you just make bad decisions, or you're reactive when you have emotions. So they're just more interested in like thoughts and solutions and problem solving. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just missing. The way I would describe that is there's lots of different information out there in the world, and it's particularly when you're in relationships. There's factual information, like what's going on, like this event is happening, or you said this, I said that. There's like thought information, so a little bit more personal, right? Here's what you think, here's what I think. And then there's emotional information. It's giving clues about who you are and how you're experiencing things or how things are impacting you. It's not more important than any of the other pieces of information, but it's one of the pieces of information that completes the whole puzzle. That if you're not including that stuff, you're missing out on a huge part of a person in relationships that you need to know about.
Right. So emotionally closed off people can also just be very avoidant. And avoidance can come in a bunch of different factors. We've talked about it before, but in this situation, it might be that not that they just don't know, that they may be too anxious to talk about it. And they might, in their mind, and I've worked with a lot of people in the dating world, and I guess in some ways this is more, in my mind, kind of a dating thing in some ways, because I feel like longer term relationships deal with this, have different ways this shows itself.
But I would say if you are in a longer term relationship and you're not sure about how this is going, or you find yourself unfulfilled or unsatisfied, or something's missing, this episode might really speak to that.
Right. The idea of kind of being able to diagnose what's going on.
Correct.
Yeah. So if in this situation, like if the people, I'll work with them and they don't know why they can't just say it, like whatever it is, like it's inevitable, we have to talk about this, whatever this is, like I really do feel this way, I don't know what they think or feel about it, and so I'm avoiding these conversations, which actually is like being emotionally unavailable, because what's happening is the status quo becomes more important than absolutely everything else. So it is a form of being closed, because you're just not going to share about it because of knowing kind of intuitively where it leads, that you're scared to go. Like, oh crap, if we have this conversation, that could mean all these things, like the fear of the unknown. So go ahead.
So yeah, and I'll close this up, and then we'll move on to the next one. And let me just say, I don't want to paint a picture of people who are closed as being like stale or stodgy or anything like that. They can be like very vibrant. They can be fun. They can be exciting. You can have great time with them. But there's no depth. Something is missing in that person, in that relationship, right? So I just want to say that even though somebody might not be speaking about the emotional things, they might be fun, happy, excited, enjoyable. You can have a great time. They can do lots of things, but that depth to the internal world is missing, right? It's almost like you would have the experience of like, yeah, we have a lot of fun together, but it's kind of like doing the same thing over and over.
Yeah, and so I'm a little stuck because I think you used the word stodgy. Did you just combine stuck and dodgy, or is stodgy a word?
No, that's a word.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
learning.
Glad you are.
But I like stuck
Everybody-
and dodgy combined way better.
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly.
what is that? I'm stuck and dodgy, and we'll call
At
that
the same
stodgy.
time. Right.
Anyways, I thought that was so. So we're at this point. We went to
Open.
close. We're up to open. Okay. So open would be like okay, talking about your own feelings and your own process, and kind of just doing that. Like you're just talking about that, and you're okay with it. And so you share. You're a person that's okay sharing. People might joke around that you are an oversharer type of a thing, or you'll say things that people won't like. Whoa, most people don't talk about that, bro. So that person, when it's a deficit, is not necessarily like they'll dominate the conversation.
Right? They're not in a healthy place with their feelings. They are aware of and talking about them, but it's kind of like all they can see.
They're seeing themselves first and kind of almost wanting, I think, the other person to be with them in it. Mm-hmm. And they don't, and which means they don't really necessarily have the capacity for themselves to be with the other, because it's like they're trying to get that taken care of and nurture on the other side first before they can do it. But it's a never-ending thing potentially.
So in other words, because their own feelings, or if it's you, like because your own feelings are what you're feeling and seeing and working on, and maybe it's because you just became aware of that you have an internal world, and you're like, oh, this is great, and I'm feeling this and I'm feeling that, and you want to work on stuff, or you're doing a lot of work. You've been doing this for years in therapy or whatever, but you haven't moved beyond that, right? So it's still about your feelings, and you're wanting and needing people to enter into that world and join you where you're at, but you're not able or willing to do the same for other people. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't want that or you're not capable of it. It might mean that you're just in a place, I would call it maturity-wise, you're still immature, like you need to grow and develop more emotionally in order to get to the place where you can do that for other people. So right now, you're just seeing and feeling your own feelings and needing people to be with you in that. And that's all you're thinking and talking about.
Right. So it's also not to be confused with out loud processing, which those folks will also be accused of dominating whatever's going on. The one of the hallmarks of a person that's open is the other person will then share their emotional whatever, and then the person that's open will somehow move that back to themselves. They will, and you know, people in the dating world will be like, this person always makes it about themselves. It takes a while though to realize that with somebody that's more open. It's easier for somebody when you're working with somebody or talking or getting to know somebody who's closed, because they kind of, when they're in the beginning, not to go backwards here, but they'll say things like, they know they're supposed to interact. They know they're supposed to be mutual. So they'll say like, oh yeah, I do that too. And they won't share, like, you'll be like, oh, what do you about? They won't share much about it, but they won't also ask about you because they're closed off. In the other situation where they're open, with openness, there's a lot more words, a lot more emotions that are talked about, and it can feel to the other person, to you, if you're the one that's in this relationship, like, oh yeah, they're available.
Because the person who's open is sharing all this stuff, and they probably think that they're connecting. Like, oh yeah, I'm telling you about myself to connect with you. but they don't realize that the connection has to go both ways, where I need to hold space for you. Instead, it's like I'm sharing about me dominating the conversation in order to connect with you, which actually kind of bulldozes you so that there is no you.
Right. Boop, boop, boop. We're just backing up to do this again. We're just going to do this one more time. One more time.
Okay, so that's open, right? And so, of course, as you're saying, if you're coming from a deficit where you're not used to that, that can seem really exciting. But as you can imagine, if you around that enough time, eventually you feel the missing piece. You're like, but it doesn't come back to me. And this is where actual emotional availability comes in. Somebody who's emotionally available has moved beyond that open stage, and they can talk about their own emotions, but they have them like sort of in a container, you would say. And when I say container, it doesn't mean they're like closed off. They're shut off from.
They're organized.
They're organized, yeah, and they are in a certain space that they should occupy. Nothing bigger than that. Occasionally, it might spill out a little bit, but generally speaking, they can sort of hold their emotions in their hand and say, "Yeah, I'm feeling this way." But then they can also have space to look at you and say, "How are you feeling?" And there's some recognition that I have my own feelings, but I'm also separate and different from you. We're not the same person, and so you probably have your own feelings. What are those? And I'm interested in those because it's very exciting and interesting to sort of share our feelings and compare notes and be like, "Oh, you're feeling something different? I want to know what you're feeling." That's exciting.
Yeah, and that part of that, or a huge part, is that idea of difference, right? Because you can be in the situation where you're saying something that you feel. And we've talked before, this is why it dovetails really well with this idea of holding space. And the other person's like, "Oh my gosh, that must be so hard," or whatever. And you might think in the moment that like, they totally agree with me. But what's happening is they see you and they're interested in what you're talking about. But you might find out in the next 5 minutes that they feel totally different about it. But what you've learned is that they actually care about you. And then they're more interesting to you because they're like, "Well, I know you don't feel like we've talked about this before. I know you don't feel the same way. How would you look at this?" Right? Those are entirely different conversations because you have these things called human beings that are interacting
Right.
more wholly or whatever. But one thing before we go, that just to speak to the tennis ball that can happen in this whole open and closed and available. Some of you may be with an open person, may have been with an open person, and they were, all sharing all about their emotions, and you figured out that it was making them all about you. And so your response to that was to go with somebody who doesn't, and now you got a closed person. So part of this is my encouragement to get off the tennis court, and it's gonna involve risk at the end of the day, because when you start to realize that the other person's holding space for you and they're interested and then they're sharing what they feel, it can feel vulnerable as soon as they share what they feel. And then you're like, "Oh, like you don't feel the same way," because can feel to some of you like, "Oh, you don't actually care about me or understand me." No, they just did that.
That's what maturity is. It's being able to hold space, right? To feel my own feelings, have my own opinions, but then to reserve space for the other person, for you to have your own thoughts and feelings and experiences that are different, and to still care about those even if mine aren't the same.
And then you sharing your feelings again that are different feels more vulnerable, but that's actually this thing called intimacy.
Right, because I've heard it said before that if you and the other person are the same, right? We always like feel the same, think the same, all that kind of stuff. Then one of you is irrelevant in a relationship. You don't want that. You want to have some similarities, right? Oh, because you got some commonalities, shared values, and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But if you are too similar, then everything just is in agreement, and probably you're not as emotionally available or as mature as you might think you are, because there naturally should be a lot of differences in a relationship, and that's okay. So in sum, bottom line is, don't play tennis, get off the tennis court, and pull out your board game and play Risk.
Have a great day. I just like I wanted to do it after that. I was
like, I don't know what you'll do with it.
like,
Because you were like, so get off the tennis court and play, and you had something about Risk, and I was like, so with the board game?
Right, I was like,
that's not. Were you even listening to the episode? What is it? Yeah. You want me to go play more board games? That's not even what I was talking about.
Yeah. The ending of the show is great because it validates my need to play board games.
Right.
You gotta wait all the way to the end.
Right. So good.
So good. So good.